Have you ever thought about the fact that Canada, a country with such resources and a high standard of living, has suddenly become synonymous with economic failure? This is not a joke, but reality. Today, we will figure out how a country that everyone considered a model of stability ended up in an economic pit. Houses that no one can afford, corporations that have accumulated trillions in their accounts, and young people who have lost faith in the future. We are beginning to understand the history of Canada's economic collapse, and you will be shocked by what is behind this tragedy. Why did Canada drop from the sixth most productive economy in the world to 18th place? How did it happen that even the poorest states in the US produce more than the entire country? And what's even worse, will Canada ever be able to get out of this nightmare? What was the main reason for this collapse? You probably know that the economy is built on money. But what if all the money in the country starts to flow out? This is exactly what is happening in Canada. Just imagine, since 2015, more than $1 trillion have left the country. You may ask, where did they go? The answer is simple, into the US. Enterprises, investors, and businessmen are leaving Canada in entire columns. The reason? It is almost impossible to work here normally. Huge taxes, the most complex bureaucratic processes, and a complete lack of investment incentives. All this makes doing business in Canada a nightmare. Let's look at the ranking of countries where it is easiest to invest. Germany, Japan, the US are ahead. And Canada? It is 3 times harder to invest here than in most countries on this list. Laws and taxes literally force companies to turn around at the border. But moving to Canada has never been easier. Now the country is breaking records in immigration levels, but this creates another problem. How can an economy that does not support its businesses give a chance to millions of new people? But what's even worse, even the money that remains in Canada does not work. The largest corporations are literally sitting on gold. Their accounts accumulate trillions of dollars, but instead of investing, they simply store them. Why have Canadian companies turned into treasure keepers instead of engines of the economy? What happened to this money, and how is it destroying the future of ordinary Canadians? Have you ever thought about what it's like to live in a country where a house, a symbol of stability and prosperity, has become an unattainable dream? Welcome to Canada. Here, real estate is not just expensive, it is the most unaffordable in the country's entire history. Until 2015, the average Canadian could afford a home that cost 5 times their annual income. Sounds reasonable, right? But now that number has approached 10. This means that even with 2 stable salaries, you wouldn't be able to buy even half of an average home. Could you live in such a reality? The irony is that homes are still being built, yet they aren't becoming any more affordable. Even renting a place in Canada now costs more than buying a home used to. And what did the government do? It acknowledged the problem only after millions of families were on the brink of bankruptcy. The real estate sector has become the #1 pillar of the country's economy. It's like a lifeline for a sinking economy. But what will happen if this bubble bursts? Why does the government continue to push housing prices up, knowing that it is destroying the financial future of young people? How did housing go from being an accessible necessity to a luxury for the few? And is there any real chance to stop this crisis? Have you ever wondered why people who work so hard achieve so little? In the 1970s, Canada was among the top 6 most productive economies in the world. But now, the country has fallen to 18th place, lagging behind even the poorest US states like Alabama. Those who used to build, create, and develop now face a completely different reality. Manufacturing facilities sit idle, and companies prefer to hoard cash rather than invest. Remember those giant corporations sitting on mountains of money? Their inaction is one of the key reasons why the country's economy has come to a standstill. High corporate taxes, long approval processes, and endless bureaucracy make doing business in Canada a real challenge. For companies, it's easier to leave or do nothing than to fight against these obstacles. Even the infrastructure that is supposed to support the economy is falling apart before our eyes. Canadian ports rely on 50-year-old technology, trucks sit in endless lines, and trade flows are slowing down. Importing or exporting goods through Canada now takes twice as long as it does through modern ports in other countries. How did a country with resources, technology, and talent let its manufacturing sector fall into such a dire state? And most importantly, who is going to pay for it? Why are Canadians working harder but seeing fewer results? What will happen to this economy if no one steps up to invest in its future? When people talk about immigration, you probably imagine that it boosts the economy. New people, new ideas, more workers. But what if I told you that in Canada it has had the opposite effect? Canada accepts more immigrants per capita than any other country in the Western world. Since 2015, the number of new residents has reached record highs. You'd think this would solve labor market problems. But here's the paradox. There aren't enough jobs for everyone, and wages are falling. This demographic surge has exposed a major issue. The economy simply can't keep up. Infrastructure is crumbling, affordable housing is non-existent, and hospitals are overwhelmed. Millions of people are arriving, but none of the basic conditions for life are being created. There's another interesting detail, a significant demographic imbalance. Among people aged 18 to 40, there are 10% more men than women in Canada. Think about what this could mean for the future of society. Increased social tension, family issues, and even broader conflicts. This is just the beginning. More people, is that always a good thing? Or is Canada simply not ready to handle this influx? When you think about a country's economy, what comes to mind? Manufacturing? Technology? What about real estate? Right now, it's real estate that is keeping Canada's economy afloat, but the price of this lifeline may be too high. The Canadian housing market is a massive bubble. Home prices are rising faster than incomes, leaving young people locked out. For an entire generation, the path to financial stability is now closed. My grandfather bought a house at 25, and I can't even rent an apartment without a roommate. You hear stories like this all across the country. As a result, young Canadians see fewer and fewer opportunities for a future here. Developers keep building, and the government turns a blind eye because real estate has become the backbone of the economy. But behind this is a serious threat. If housing prices start to fall, it could bring down the entire economic system. Investors, corporations, and even foreign buyers are turning Canadian housing into a financial instrument. For them, what matters is price growth, not the people who actually need homes to live in. Real estate is now the #1 sector in Canada's economy, even surpassing manufacturing. But you know this can't last forever. The question isn't if the bubble will burst, it's when. What will happen to Canada if real estate can no longer support its economy? What will be the cost of this crisis for millions of people? When an economic crisis becomes obvious, you expect the government to step in, to develop a plan, take action, and help people. But in Canada, it's the opposite. Politicians discuss, form committees, and then do nothing. Take the housing crisis, for example. Since 2015, home prices have skyrocketed, pushing young people out of major cities. And what was the government's response? A weekend retreat. And guess what? They came back without a plan. Meanwhile, the economy keeps collapsing. Canada remains one of the highest taxed countries in the world. For businesses, that's a clear message. Leave. And they are leaving, taking jobs, innovation, and the country's future with them. People aren't happy either. The current ruling party has become one of the most unpopular in modern Canadian history. Canadians are tired of promises that are never fulfilled. But instead of real change, the government continues to focus on population growth and raising taxes. Do you think trust can ever be restored when crises keep piling up? Immigration is increasing, infrastructure is falling apart, and the government pretends everything is under control. Why is the government, instead of fixing the situation, driving the final nails into the coffin of the economy? So we've seen how Canada's economy has fallen into decline. Billions of dollars are leaving the country, housing prices are at record highs, and the government seems to have forgotten that its job is to help people. But here's the biggest question. Is there a way out? Experts say recovery is possible. Lowering taxes, supporting businesses, and cutting bureaucracy could give the economy the boost it needs. If Canada focused on revitalizing resource industries and modernizing infrastructure, it could once again become attractive to investors. After all, this has happened before. Canada was once a model for the world, a country that attracted investment, created jobs, and gave young people a future. Why not do it again? But there's one catch. This would require radical changes in leadership. Is the government ready to take responsibility? Can Canadians come together, break the cycle, and change the system? Can Canada survive, recover, and rise again? That answer is up to them. Share your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching.